There was a new study that came out from Cornell University that got a lot of people's attention. It was a big paper that was drawn from 6 separate studies, and within those studies, they asked people what their biggest regret in life was. And it turns out, people don't regret things they do. They regret things that they don't do. The study showed that, ultimately, their biggest regret was not living out their ideal self. My guest on the podcast today, #1 New York Times bestselling author Ben Nemtin, decided to do something about the results of this study. So he and his 3 friends created the world's greatest bucket list to make them feel alive. For everything that they checked off on their own bucket list, they helped other people cross something off on theirs. Ben's message, A Radical Possibility, has since been featured by major media outlets like The Today Show, The Oprah Winfrey Show, CNN, and NBC News. Oh, and if that's not enough, he also created, produced, and starred in an MTV series called The Buried Life, which is probably how you've heard of Ben. It aired in over 80 countries and is MTV's highest-rated show ever on iTunes. From playing basketball with President Obama to streaking a professional soccer field, from raising over $400,000 for charity to placing a record-breaking $250,000 bet on roulette, Ben's bucket list quest has inspired millions of people to chase their dreams and realize that impossible is possible. And you're going to hear all about this project and the backstory and the meaningful work that Ben is doing today on today's episode. I'm Branden Harvey, and this is Sounds Good. This is the weekly podcast where we have conversations with inspiring people who are rejecting cynicism and using their lives to make an impact. Let's jump straight into this. We hopped on the phone a few weeks ago, and I think we were scheduled to talk for like 30 minutes or something. And I feel like we ended up going for an hour. And I just had a great time talking with you, getting to know you, hearing about what you're up to, and kind of the exciting plans you have ahead of you. But I'm excited that we're getting to talk today. This is going to be so fun to have another hour together.
Yeah, I know, right? Yeah, it was really fun. And we just kept talking. So I guess we're just going to keep talking.
We'll have you on for every episode from now on. You're just my co-host. Yeah. This is great. Yeah. Where are you at today? Where are you traveling right now?
I am. I'm outside of Scottsdale, Arizona, and
nice.
I'm speaking at an event called The Gathering, which is for Lululemon. So it's all a lot of their employees come to this once a year. It's actually pretty cool that Lulu does this. It's just self-improvement. So it has nothing to do with business, and it's all about you. So it's kind of a cool event to come to, and it's a beautiful little spot, outside of the city.
That's amazing.
It feels very much like Joshua Tree, like big boulders.
I love Joshua Tree.
The desert, cactuses, little desert hares. It's really cool.
That's beautiful. And you're speaking a lot right now, right? Like you're pretty much constantly traveling, speaking, presenting to crowds.
Yeah, it's the way it's turned out the last little while. So I've been bouncing around the country and sort of the world, which has been
good.
Really cool.
And you're enjoying it?
Yeah, the travel hasn't caught up to me yet. But it's been really cool to explore places that I never knew existed. It's like I was telling you on the phone. I was in Chelan at Lake Chelan in Washington, if I'm even pronouncing it correctly. It's a lake in the middle of the state that I would never even knew it existed. And so all these places that are kind of retreats that I get to pop in and experience, and then the people that I'm meeting, I've really been loving meeting people from around the country, and it's still a bit of optimism around the people in this country. I'm Canadian, and but I've lived here in the U.S. for about 10 years. I'm just continually kind of astounded at how many good people there are out there, and I know this is what you do, so all about this, but as you know very well, we hear about all the other types of people, and it's refreshing to actually meet these people in every state that are just salt of the earth, want to do great things. A lot of them are working in healthcare to give back, and so it's kind of just renewed my sense of optimism. So that's been one of the unexpected side effects of the travel. These two things, like exploring new places that I never knew existed, little gems, that really are just kind of local knowledge, and then meeting people that are just straight up good people and like nice to be around. So it's been fun, man.
Man, that's so good to hear. And it's encouraging to hear that you're traveling around the United States and you're encouraged and happy about the people that you're meeting. Because when I think about Canada, I'm like, oh, everybody there is nice. Everybody there is kind. And I'm glad that you're maybe feeling the same way about the United States.
Yeah.
Okay, so you grew up in Canada. Where in Canada did you grow up?
I grew up on an island out off of Vancouver, sort of off the coast of Vancouver, called Vancouver Island, and in a city called Victoria.
Oh, I know Victoria. Yeah.
So Victoria, BC, it's beautiful. It's a smaller city, but it's still maybe 300,000 people, so still a decent size. And it's pretty idyllic to grow up. You have mountains for skiing, you have the ocean, you have lakes, you're out in nature. I mean, you're on an island. So it was a really amazing place to grow up. And then I moved down to LA about 10 years ago. But I love to go back.
What was kind of growing up in that context like? What was your community like? What was your family like?
So it was the type of place where we didn't really lock our doors, or like it didn't matter.
Totally.
Sometimes we would. Sometimes we wouldn't.
I grew up the same way.
Yeah, and it was very safe, and I just the high school. It felt like you were almost in a bubble, for better or for worse. I remember, my friend from Oakland came and visited me in high school, and he just was like, this is like Pleasantville. He couldn't believe that this place existed, that it was so perfect. It just was, I always like to describe it as like, it wasn't a city that was too big where you had everything at your fingertips, or too small where you didn't feel like you could actually leave. Like you still saw people leave, and that inspired you to also believe that you could do so and do whatever you wanted. But it wasn't so big where you were around people that were entitled, or that you just, everything was so easy for you to get that you lost your drive. So a lot of really like interesting people came out of Victoria, like Steve Nash, the basketball player, MVP, Nelly Furtado, Pamela Anderson was from around where we grew up. It just was it's just a really safe, like fun place to grow up. And the university there is fantastic, one of the best in the country. So I went to university there, I was living with my parents, and life was good.
Man. Okay. That's great to hear. So obviously the big thing that I think a lot of people know you from is, the buried life. And how do you go from kind of living in this town that feels a little bit like, utopia or Pleasantville, and it sounds like it would be somewhere where it's easy to become content and satisfied and willing to just kind of settle in because it's a great location, great place, great community. How do you go from that to basically saying, no, I want more. I want to pursue something greater than this? So
I was kind of forced into that mindset. The thing is, nothing is ever what it seems. And nothing's perfect. Nothing's terrible. You're all, it's always a state of flux in between. And so for me, I mean, as I said, life was great. I had an academic scholarship to the University of Victoria. So this is my hometown university. I was, just graduated high school. So I was excited to move on to the next chapter. I had an amazing group of friends and family. And also I made the national rugby team, sort of the U19 national rugby team.
That's a big deal in Canada, right?
It is, right? Yeah. It's like, third biggest sport behind hockey and hockey. So I was like, I was stoked. And I played fly half. So just to give a kind of quick,
I don't know at all what that means.
What that means. It's like, for, to give you like a football analogy, it's like the quarterback and the field goal kicker in one position.
Oh,
so wow. You are calling the shots and in high pressure situations. And just by nature of who I am, I always put pressure on myself, very highly critical, and always wanted to succeed and just be liked by everybody, right? That was just like, that was the thing that really ended up being almost like my Achilles heel, because what happened was I put so much pressure on myself that I started worrying about my field goal kicks, because I had missed a field goal at the end of this, of what it would be similar to the state championship, it was like the provincial championship in high school, right at the end, lost the game, just haunted me. And I thought, what if that happens again when I go to the World Cup in France, when I'm playing on the highest stage, and if I mess up, it's over, like that's it. And I couldn't get this thought out of my head. And it would especially come to me at night in the form of anxiety, where I'd worry about, what if I missed an easy field goal right in front of the goalpost? And this anxiety caused me to be unable to sleep. And ultimately, this lack of sleep over time, I started to fall and slide into a depression. And this was something I had no experience with, right? I was A-type personality, loved being the center of attention, ton of friends, very social, high achiever. And all of a sudden, I had trouble leaving the house. So I was unable to go to school. I simply did not have, I felt crippled by, didn't feel crippled, I was crippled by this anxiety and this depression where I couldn't go to school. So I dropped out of school. I couldn't go to practice. And I told the rugby coach that I had a back injury, and I left the team. And the reality is I couldn't go. And I digressed to the point where I couldn't leave the house. So I was really a shut-in into my parents' house. Now, this is like in the matter of months, from everything that I just explained to my parents just encouraging me to go outside for 15 minutes a day. And I would walk down the front steps, and they'd shut the door, and I'd go for my 15-minute walk, and I would generally just go and hide in my driveway for 15 minutes and then come back and tell them I went for a walk. So they would think that I had gone outside for 15 minutes. So it was a terrifying time. I did not understand why I was feeling like this. And you can imagine it was awful for my family and my friends, and just, so this was like all of a sudden my new reality.
Did you have language to put on it? Did you kind of know, oh, I'm depressed? Or did it just feel like, okay.
Yeah, like it was, that was definitely the diagnosis. I wasn't like really connecting with any doctors in a meaningful way, or therapists. So later I would learn how important that is. But at that point I was very closed off to any of that, which, by the way, most teenagers are, right? So I ended up dropping out of school, dropping from the rugby team, and all this, sort of becoming a recluse. And then my friends came, and now it was the summer after I dropped out of school, and they said, Ben, we're moving to Banff, Alberta for the summer, and we're going to work there. It's going to be fun, and then we're going to come back and go to school. You should come with us. And I didn't feel like doing anything. So they very much, almost forced me to come with them. And so I go to this new town, and I get a job, start meeting new people. I slowly start talking about really what's happening, what I'm feeling like, what's going on. I start feeling some self-worth because I'm on my own. I'm I've got this job. I'm feeling like I'm contributing. I'm getting sort of inspired by these new young people that I'm meeting that have traveled the world or started their own businesses. And I slowly start coming out of my fog, right? And like this is over, a few months where I start to feel better. And ultimately, many things that I did, there are many things that I did to feel better, and practices that I make sure I do to make sure I always feel, or I try to feel good. But, one of the things that I'll mention, because it's really pertinent to the story, is I really noticed that I was affected by the people that I was surrounded by, that I chose to surround myself with, namely these new people that I had met over in this new town. And I was like, wow, this really has an effect on my well-being. And I'm also like fired up about all the things they're doing. So it makes me think about what I can do. And so driving back, I made a decision to try and surround myself with people that inspired me. And this small decision would completely change the path of my life, because I came home and I thought about my friends and who inspired me. And not many of them sort of checked that box, but there was one kid that I knew from the neighborhood from growing up, and his name was Johnny. And Johnny was a self-taught filmmaker, and he would make movies of him and his friends in the neighborhood. And at the end of every summer, all the kids in the neighborhood would go watch the movie. And it was really cool and really like just an awesome thing to be a part of. And I was never a part of that, but I wanted to be. So I called up Johnny, and I was tentative because he took my sister to prom. So I was like, conflicted about whether I should reach out.
Oh yeah, that's weird.
So, but I said, Johnny, let's make a movie. And he was like, I just talked to my friend Dave about this. And he was also, interested in doing something. And so I said, I'll call your older brother Duncan, and let's all get together and let's talk about making a movie. And so that's what we did. We got on Skype, and they were at McGill University in Montreal, and I was in Victoria, and we'd get on Skype and we started talking about this movie that we wanted to make, but we didn't know what it was going to be about. And then Johnny, in first year university in English class at McGill, gets assigned a poem as required reading in English 101. The poem's called The Buried Life. It's a 150-year-old poem. And something in it strikes him, and he brings the poem back to us. He says, guys, read these 4 lines. And the 4 lines of the poem, which I'll share, are, but often in the world's most crowded streets, but often in the din of strife, there rises an unspeakable desire after the knowledge of our buried life. And he said, guys, this poem is this 150-year-old poem is articulating this feeling.
It's beautiful.
Yeah, that we can't articulate, basically. That we have all these things that we want to do, but we don't do them because they get buried by school, work, day to day, by life. And there's these moments when we get inspired, but that ultimately ends up getting buried. And so we thought, okay, let's take this name and call this movie The Buried Life, even though we don't know what it's going to be about.
So now you've got a title.
So now we've got a title.
You got a title and filmmakers.
Yeah. And we say, okay, now how do we unbury these things? And we thought death was the only thing that shook us enough to realize and to like think about what was important. If we really internalized that we weren't going to live forever and we could die at any moment, like, what do we want to do? So this question, what do you want to do before you die, became this kind of mantra that we would ask ourselves and ultimately anyone we came into contact with. And if the answer to this question came this list, which was like the most epic bucket list we could ever think of. Sort of, if you could do anything, if you had $100 million in your bank, what would you do? And our answers were like, go to space, make a TV show, write a #1 New York Times bestseller, sit with Oprah, pay off our parents' mortgage, tell a judge you want the truth, you can't handle the truth. Like all these really kind of like really crazy things that we never thought we would ever do.
And you all collectively worked on that list together. It's like a list that the 4 of you made.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. And then we thought, okay, if we go after this list, we're not going to be able to do any of this stuff without the help of other people. So how about every time we cross something off, we'll help a stranger do something they want to do. And we'll ask, just people on the street, wherever we go, what do you want to do before you die? And if we can help them do that thing, then we will. And we'll try and do 1 for 1. And we'll go on a 2-week road trip, and we'll cross off as many things as we can, and we'll help as many people as we can, and we'll make a movie about it. So
amazing.
This is 2006.
I love it. 2006. Okay.
2006. So that was the goal. So we just hustled to get together, we bought a camera on eBay. We worked extra jobs. We built a website with our 100 dreams. We got pretended we had a production company and like cold called companies.
No, that's
like
the way to do it.
For money to sponsor our film. And a juice company gave us $2,000 to pay for all of our gas. And then we boarded an RV, basically, like out of we literally pulled it out of this marsh because it was in the backyard of Johnny and Duncan's uncle's house. And we took the RV to a mechanic. The mechanic's like, this thing isn't going to make it back. So we like almost didn't go because we didn't have the money to tow it back if we didn't make it. But we're like, screw it, like we're gonna do it. And we like sort of fib to our bosses that we had to take 2 weeks off work at the end of the summer before we went back to school to do, we had weddings or whatever. And the real mission was to go on this road trip. So this was like kind of the mission, right?
Yeah.
We're kind of like, we're just begging, borrowing, and stealing to get it together.
And at this point, do you feel like you're kind of coming out of your depression because you've got this purpose, you've got this mission, you've got this goal?
I think that in a large part, what I've realized, because I've gone through another dip, and we can talk about that, but I noticed that there's patterns of things that I am really actually suppressing that contribute to my mental fitness and well-being. And one of those things is creativity. So like when I start to suppress my creativity. And like I can always feel it. Like I want to do these things, like these, whatever it may be, like make a video or do this or, and I'm usually like, I don't have time to do that. So I suppress that. And for me, Buried Life was like my first real creative outlet. And it was so much fun. Like we were, producing before we even knew what producing was. We were filmmaking, even though I had no experience whatsoever filmmaking. We were connecting with people. We were having fun, doing little skits. And that was kind of always my dream, was like I always wanted to make like an SNL like skit show, like a sketch show with my friends. And so we ended up putting that on the list, like make a TV show was like on the list. And so what I loved about it was like I was working with people that were inspiring me and pushing me to think bigger and extend myself and step into discomfort and piecing it all together for this road trip was going to be a lot of fun. So at this point, it was no more than that though, right? Like it was just, this was like, we didn't even tell people really what we were doing.
Yeah.
Because it was so weird. Like it was like a lot of times when we were trying to get sponsors, people were like, no way, we're not going to fuel your booze cruise, basically. Like people thought
really? So they just didn't even think that it was something of value.
Yeah, exactly. They just thought it was like a couple lads going out on going for a piss up around around BC, just having fun. So we didn't really tell very many people. And so we left on this trip, and the first list item was to be a knight in shining armor. So it was like I just wanted to do sort of my daily to-dos in a suit of armor. And I was able to like get this full, like a full suit that you would see in a museum, just with a chainmail and a helmet and a sword and everything. And essentially called all the news sort of stations in Victoria and said we were going to do this big stunt, and we didn't really know what we were going to do. And I stepped out of this crappy RV that we had sort of made run. And I was in this full suit with a sword and I was sort of sweating. And I was like, oh no, there's all these news cameras on me waiting for me to do something. And then there's this 6-year-old boy walking with his mom holding a plastic sword. And you can just see, as soon as he sees me step out, his eyes just go wide, like, loonies. I'll say that for all my Canadians out there. And he doesn't say a word. He just lets go of his mom's hand, runs over to me, and then kneels down and bows his head.
No.
So I'm like, okay, I got to knight this kid. I'm a knight. So I knight him. And then all these kids are running from, I don't know where, but they just coming out of the woodwork. They all gather around me, and I start knighting all these kids in a circle. And, I'm escorting them across the road, just like doing my nightly duties. And so we're feeling good, right? We've crossed off a list item. And the next day, we leave officially and we pick up the paper, and as we go, we sort of realize, wow, we actually crossed off 2 list items, because on the front page of the newspaper is a photo of me with the little boy with the plastic sword. And so we're like, that was number 7 on the list, make the front page of the newspaper.
That's beautiful.
That's amazing. So this sort of starts this journey where now we just hit the road, and people are stepping up in the most unexpected ways to help us cross things off our list. And then we're realizing that we can actually help other people do the things on their list through the help of other people. So we're really just connecting people that need help with people that can give, and realizing these bucket list items. And so it's this, 2 weeks is this flurry of like crossing off list items that we didn't think that we could, and helping other people. And we're really realizing the impact that has on you as someone that helps someone else, what that feels like. Because we'd never helped anybody before, really. Like, we didn't volunteer in high school. And so this was a big changing point for us, where we realized this fills you up in a way that doing things for yourself doesn't. And so we thought we got to keep doing this. And ironically, we get an email from a producer that saw us on the news and said, hey, have you guys ever thought about making a TV show? And
you're like, as a matter of fact, that's number blank on the list.
Yeah, 53. Yes, exactly. So it now started this journey towards like crossing off number 53, make a TV show, which ended up being, we got offered a show in Canada, ended up turning that down because they wanted to own it and control it, and we wanted to be in control. And so we ended up just creating our own episode and then selling it to MTV down in the South.
That's a pretty scary thing to do, though, to basically say, I've got this thing on my list. My only goal is to make a TV show, not to have a TV show and own the rights to it. And you say no. What was your thought process there?
We were surprised by two things. One, by how much impact we were having just by doing what we were doing. We didn't think anybody would care that we were going after our list. In fact, we thought it was a little self-serving. We thought maybe the documentary will just be about asking other people and helping them. And that would be a cool doc, but we'll do our stuff on the side, but maybe we won't be in the documentary because it's a little selfish. But people really were just inspired by the idea. They were just inspired by the fact that 4 friends went out and did that, and it made them think about what they wanted to do. And that was such a cool realization that, like, by doing what you love, you actually inspire other people to do what they love.
Ooh, that's good. That's a good line right there. I love that.
Yeah. So it was kind of this realization that, wow, this is working, we're getting this kind of really like deep satisfaction from doing this and helping others. And when we got the deal for the TV show, it was just clear that it wasn't going to be our TV show. The list item was make a TV show, not be in a TV show. So we wanted to be in control in some way, shape, or form. And it was pretty clear that we were going to lose that control. And we didn't want to lose control of the buried life because it was just so magic. Like something was happening,
Yeah.
And it was resonating with people. And so we just thought, screw it. And it was a really tough decision. Especially because everyone thought we made a huge mistake. And we even thought we made a huge mistake a year or two down the line when we, continued to do it our way and realized, crap, like we've just invested all this time and energy and money. And like this documentary thing that we thought we were making is just probably not going to happen because it's too expensive and who's going to buy it? And we just passed on a TV show and now where are we? We're like in debt and we don't have anything. But we really stayed the course. And ultimately, I think that's the beauty of working with your friends or people that you really love, is that they pick you up when you're down and you pick them up when they're down. And
that's good.
Ultimately that collective will is much greater than your own will. So we really persevered and ultimately it ended up coming to fruition, and then we checked it off.
That's beautiful. And tell me about, the process of moving from doing this on your own, with your own cameras, with your own goals, mindsets, crew, to, then working with MTV on this, it's got to change a little bit. Kind of what did that look like and how did things change? And, what did that allow you to do? And what did that kind of limit for you?
Yeah. So big change and very challenging. And by the way, this is now 2 years later. So it just to give some context on the time line here. So we did that first 2-week road trip. We talked with the producer. We ended up turning down the TV show and we're like, we're going to do this on our own. Back to school, fundraised the whole year. Next year, bought a purple 1969 transit bus, filmed with a crew from LA that we had funded for 2 months, going after our list, helping other people, with the intention of filming the documentary, right? So we filmed more stories and just like more magic happened. And then we come back, we're like, hey, let's put this documentary together. And then we sort of were hit with the reality of how expensive post-production is and that there's no buyer in 2007 for this type of documentary. And so then we hit this low. And then we're finally like, let's take the footage that we shot and let's make our own episode of the show we would want to make. Met someone that knew someone in LA and over a year got a meeting with MTV. And then another year of piecing it together and starting to we moved to LA. And so now we're making the show and it's way different, And the thing though, that we made sure that when we did the deal with MTV, we made some stipulations that we needed to be executive producers of the show. We wanted to hire our friends that had been traveling with us for the last 2 years as our crew, to be the film crew. We wanted to choose the list items and essentially have our hands in the edit and choose the music and basically not let them help us with anything, because that was the whole, the show doesn't work if they were making the things happen, because the whole point of the buried life is how would you and your friends do it? We're no different than you. So this is about 4 guys, just, or girls, but like this was guys going out and trying to make this shit happen. And so if you have a $1 billion network behind you, of course you can do whatever you want. So it was very, like, we were very intentional, for lack of a better word, when we structured the deal to make sure that we were in control of the creative and, in large part the show. So we chose the biggest list items we could think of. And, but now we were in this system, which is a production of television. We couldn't just be us and our, 3 or 4 friends. And it was a team of 20 or 30 on the road. And that was as scaled down as we could, because what happens with TV is, like, you need to clear locations. You need to have audio. You need to have someone log into footage. You need to have, someone managing the scouts and all this stuff. So it was an absolute, we were jumping into unknown territory. And what that meant was that we really had to push back on the traditional reality television norms. And the reality television norms are such that whatever you do, it's scripted. So if you want to go shoot something for an unscripted show, the location that you go into is cleared. The conversation that you're having is scripted. And there's a bunch of people around you telling you, essentially, if they're not telling you what to say, they're telling you the beats to hit, right? So this just wouldn't work for our show. Like, there were times where we were, like, coming up and surprising people with their biggest dream. They couldn't know that we were going to be doing that. And there were times where we were, like, going after things like breaking into the CMT Awards to ask out Taylor Swift. Like, she couldn't know we were coming. The CMT couldn't know that we were coming. And so there was a ton of tension where we ultimately, thank God, won, but it made it so much harder because we would film something and then we would pull off this miracle of, like, either breaking into the CMTs or, we broke into the Playboy Mansion and all these things that, like, they said we need to go clear these first. And then we had to go afterwards and clear them, which was a nightmare, because they're like, no, we're not going to let you air that because you just broke into Hugh Hefner's house. So it was like this big pull back and forth. But ultimately, we would somehow clear these locations after we filmed, and we would do the thing and not let everyone where we were filming know that we had, like, cameras in the bushes and mics in different places hidden. So it just made it like a whole new challenge. But it was like, it was the only way that the show could work.
Yeah, and you had that goal in mind, and you're like, we're gonna do it this way, or we're not gonna do it. What were some of those early challenges that you went after? What were some of those things you wanted to cross off the list
when we were filming the show?
Yeah, on the show. Sorry.
Yeah, totally. So there was. One of them was ask out the girl of your dreams. So there was Duncan asked out Taylor Swift and actually phenomenally got in, asked her, and went on a date with her. So that was, like,
what? You went on a date with her? Yeah,
it worked. It was. I'm actually still stunned that it worked because mine was. This is right when Transformers came out. So I'm going after Megan Fox. So I tried to ask out Megan Fox and I failed miserably, right? Like, I snuck onto the red carpet at the Transformers 2 premiere, pretending to be a reporter. I had a microphone in my hand that was literally tucked into my pocket. And I got on the red carpet and I had a moment with her and on the red carpet, and I just, like, couldn't get, like, have the guts to do it. And I totally blew it. So Duncan completely crossed that off. I completely failed.
So do you still have to at some point, or did he cross it off for the collective group? Like, are you still waiting to ask out your dream?
Yeah. Like, so I don't really want to anymore. Not that, nothing against Megan Fox. Like, now I have a girlfriend that I'm totally head over heels in love with. So, and that's the thing about the list is, like, it changes as you change.
That's good. I like that you hold it loosely.
Yeah. And as you change, your goals change. And so your list should change as well. So it's, there were some things that we did that I would never want to do again. Streak a field. Like, I will never put myself through that. It was just so terrifying.
It was one of those awful ones.
Yeah. Like, it was in the moment. And at the time it was something we wanted to do it. And the actual list item was to streak and get away. So we wanted to pull off the perfect streak. And so we went to an MLS game in Kansas City, and we got permission to film under the guise that we just wanted to experience the game, which is sometimes what we had to do, unfortunately. Just sort of. So I was dressed up like I worked for the team, and there's two of the other guys, Duncan and Dave, were dressed up like security for the field, and Johnny had a front row seat, and he was the streaker. And the whole plan was he streaks, Duncan and Dave cut him off as if there's the first security to him. They're going to tell all the security guys, I got him, and then they're going to hand it off to me, who looks like I work for the team, and I'm going to pretend it's promotion. And of course, none of this worked, and we all got arrested.
Oh, no.
And yeah, so
honestly, that was a really good plan. That was a really good plan.
That's what we thought. That's what we thought. We all ended up streaking, by the way. So that was the one thing that ended up, we were very clear right away that there were more police than we ever thought could be in a stadium. And right away, Johnny was arrested. And so we thought he was in handcuffs, and we thought, well, if he's going down, we're all going down. So we just all streaked. So it was mayhem, like 3 or 4 guys streaking at once. It was really, it's actually on Vimeo. If you search the Buried Life Streak, it's probably one of the funniest.
I cannot wait to go see this afterwards.
The point is, like, so we're doing all these things that are really outrageous, but they're kind of by design, right? Like our goal, our thought for the show at least was like, okay, we're going to have to go after things that are very outrageous, because at the end of the day, the real, the heart of the show is helping other people, but it's difficult to lead with that and sell that to a buyer or a viewer. You know, it's kind of just a harder thing to rope people into. And so our sort of philosophy always like start with the fun, cool, like sexy stuff. And then even without them even knowing, maybe even perhaps like after the show, before they may not even notice when they're watching it, but like the message, and the message being like, one, you can go after that thing because we're no different than you. And also that like, you get more satisfaction out of helping others. And so these stories that we found of people basically sort of unearthing their dreams were always the most impactful. You know, it was always the coolest part, you know, reuniting a son and father after 17 years, or helping a guy get his dad who was homeless a house, helping a girl overcome her fear of heights. And then another girl like who lost her mom in Katrina never found her mom's grave, and because she was you know, basically from Katrina, some people were put in buses and relocated, and she passed away while they were being relocated, and she just didn't know where her mom's grave was. So we helped her find her mom's grave that was all the way out in Colorado from where she was miles away. So it was you know, these really human stories. It basically just from asking people on the street, what do you want to do before you die? And the other thing that we found is like, a lot of the time we found that just simply just being there to listen and asking them a question, just listening to them was enough, you know? Like a lot of people just want someone to be there to listen.
I think I can speak on behalf of others when I say, unless you've really thought about it, you don't always know what your goals are, or at least I don't have my like bucket list on the tip of my tongue. Like I don't have these things written down, but somebody asking me, somebody, you know, diving into that with me, it almost kind of helps that come to life, because I think we all have those goals, but I mean, for lack of a better word, like we truly do bury them. Like we'll suppress them and we'll push them down. And there's something beautiful about somebody sitting down with you and intentionally and truly wanting to know what those things are. And then even, you know, taking it one step further, helping you achieve those things. And sometimes those are your friends, and sometimes those are, you know, Canadian strangers on MTV. But I don't know. I think that's beautiful. And I love that people watching this show had the opportunity to think about, okay, what are the things in my life? You know, whether they're ridiculous or deep or somewhere in between.
Yeah. I mean, I think what you said at the beginning is, I mean, it all resonates, but the thing that I think is coming up again and again, and for me, is this: people, you know, will have a good idea about what they want for personal goals, you know, but they are the first to get pushed to the back burner. And this is just human nature. This is just what happens to us. You know, we prioritize things, and as we do that, we lose time in our day, and you have to prioritize those things that are important to you. So much so that like this was a real wake up call for me. There's a new study that came out by Cornell in a big paper that was drawn from 6 separate studies, where they asked people what at the end of their life, what their biggest regret is in life. And it turns out, it may not be a surprise, but it turns out people don't regret things they do. They regret, in large part, things that they don't do.
Fascinating.
So 76% of people, over 3/4 of the population, their number one regret was not living out their ideal self. So not doing the things they really wanted to do. That is heartbreaking, that over 3/4 of the population regrets not being who they are, right? Like not doing what they really wanted to do because they're, and there's many things that get in the way that we can talk about, but let's just talk about that as a simple statistic. That is shocking. At the end of the day, that's why I like to continue to spread this message and speak, is because we just don't take the time to think about this stuff. And it's so important because life will just sweep you up. And before you know it, you'll be old and you'll be dying and you'll think back and be like, damn, I really wish I would have done that. That's what happens. That's just, that's just what happens because it's human nature. And so we really need to be like intentional about carving out time to think about what's important to us, not our friends or family or anybody else, but just like really look into our hearts and our gut and touch base with that. And then we need to prioritize those things. We need to write them down. We need to talk about them to other people so that other people can help us. We need to really be, persist in those and make sure that we make those things happen. And so it's a super important topic, I think.
Yeah, no, it's so important. And I love that you've, in so many ways, dedicated your life and spent so much time helping other people do this. And maybe I want to take this a step further and ask, how do you do this? How do you live into who you truly are? How do you, put these things at so much of a priority that you actually live them out and that maybe you don't die with that regret, on a practical, tangible level? How do you get started with that?
Yeah. So I'm a big believer in making things simple and easy. And I think that especially for this topic, it needs to be simple and easy because there's so many barriers and there's so many reasons why you shouldn't do it in our minds that we ultimately don't. So simple, like just tangible steps, I think are super important. So one, like to preface this, I think it's important to understand that most people wait for inspiration to do that thing that they want, right? Like we've all been there. We're like, you know what? I don't feel up to it today. Or, like I'm waiting for the right time, or really like you're waiting for that inspiration so you feel moved to do it. But the problem is that never comes. And that inspiration comes from action. That inspiration comes from actually doing it. That's when you start to feel the inspiration, when you actually start to create that momentum and you actually start to do it. So just like think about that when you're waiting for inspiration, that it's never going to come. It's going to come by you making it happen, by you actually.
That's a really good reminder.
Like immersing yourself in it. And that's when the inspiration is going to come. So how do you take those first steps? Well, the first is, I believe, to write down those things, to take the time. So, whatever that might be for you, but, perhaps it's just quiet time by yourself. Maybe it's a conversation with someone else, but take the time to think about what's really important in your life and think about it through the lens of, I right now have $100 million in my bank account and I can do anything. I have the ability to do anything. So if I want to climb Everest, I'm an amazing climber. If I want to paint for the rest of my life, I'm an incredible painter. So I have the ability and I have the means. So just pretend that's, the case, and that's how you write your list, okay? And writing it down is so important because you're actually, if we talk about steps, this is the first step. Because what you're doing is you're taking an idea and you're making it real. So you're actually creating something, you make something that's intangible, tangible, and you're sort of breathing life into your dreams. And a crazy statistic or piece of data is that you're 40% more likely to achieve your goals if you write them down. So that is an easy 40%, right? Just write them down. Boom, you're almost ahead of half the population. So that's why journaling is important. But like you can just write down your list. So now the first step is writing it down. The second, to kind of get into this inspiration and to start it going, is sharing your list, sharing your dreams, sharing your goals. So I find it interesting that any other problem that we are faced with, any other goal that we are trying to achieve, let's talk about a work problem you have. What do? Well, you reach out to your colleague. You say, hey, what did you do when you came up against this? Or you reach to your boss or a mentor, or you do research online, or you talk with your community, your friends, your family, and you ask for their advice, right? Like that's how we overcome obstacles is by casting a wide net, getting as much information as we can, distilling it, and then using what we think is the best, nuggets of information to achieve that goal. We don't do that with our personal goals. We just feel like we need to do them on our own. And it's just much harder to do that. So like if you talk about your list, you don't know who can help you. And help will show up in the most unexpected places if you talk about the things that you want to do passionately and to the right people, right? So like I'm a big believer in, one, just when you're talking with friends or whoever, just talk about the thing you want. Yeah, well, you know what? I really want to write a book. I have no experience writing at all, but I just have this thing that I want to write a book about. And you don't happen to know like any authors, do you? And chances are that someone will know an author and you can then get connected to them, and then that starts the process. And the other part is like being intentional about your outreach. So you can actually then ask people, hey, do you know any authors? Because I really want to write a book. Ask that to 10 people. Chances are someone's going to know an author, or they're going to have written a book, So what these do is like they start to like build little bits of accountability. So you create this momentum, because that's really what you need to drive this thing forward in the beginning. Because most people don't take that first step. It's such a hard thing to do. But you just got to build these little, bits of accountability and start to kind of move this big boulder forward.
Yeah.
And get some momentum.
I think about my life and I think about all the things that I'm most proud of accomplishing. And I think without even thinking about it or being this intentional about it, they were the things where I just spoke them out loud. I said, this is what I want to do. I want to be a photographer. I want to launch this project, and I'm putting it on Kickstarter. It's these things where you publicly are proclaiming this thing that you want to be true about you. It's not true yet, but you're speaking it into existence. And people rally behind that because, like what you said earlier about the show, there's so much more joy to be found in and fulfillment to be found in helping others follow their dreams. And so, I don't know, it's actually great to think about that as just, why don't I start doing this a little bit more as a discipline? And maybe there's almost like a shame aspect. I don't know what it is that naturally keeps me from wanting to say the things that I'm excited about or that I care about or that I want to do. But something holds, I don't know, do you have any idea what that is? What that thing is that kind of naturally holds us back from naturally sharing those things with the world?
Yeah, I think in large part it's fear. I think it's fear of just straight up looking bad, and which is tied into failure. So people are afraid that they might fail, and they're afraid of how that might look. And I think just looking bad in general, it's just like, it's unfortunately something that really drives us. And so the irony is, there's two types of failure. There's a type of failure that comes along with being afraid, so you never do it, or you're waiting for the right time. And unfortunately, you just don't learn anything from that failure. And, being that timid ultimately ends up crippling you. Now, the other type of failure comes along with trying and failing. But what you learn from that failure far outweighs any potential, and I say potential, hit to your reputation, right?
That's like good.
That's how you grow. That's how you learn about yourself. And I mean, there's always outliers, but I truly believe that, failure is a course correction to success generally. Most of the times when I fail, something comes out of it. And at the very least, you learn something about yourself. But generally what happens is you literally, like just like a compass, just move, and you shift your direction. You realize, oh yeah, actually this isn't really what I wanted, or actually this isn't going to work. But what I just learned from this is X. So I'm going to take X and I'm going to go this way. And, you know, we are in this, I think we have this mentality where it's like, if you try and fail, back to square one. But that's not how it works. I mean, you can think about, like, I think we think about this with careers too, which is like, which I think is also kind of backwards, that like, I've been in this career for 10 years. If I start something new, I'm starting from square one. You know, that's a lot of times why people don't change as they grow. They want to try something different, but they stay with what they're doing because it's safe, and also because they think like, well, you know what? Like, I don't want to start again. But that's not, you recycle. That's what you do. You recycle your career, and you use all the things that you've learned, and you just upcycle them into something different. And whatever that is, you have to be passionate about it. So yeah, so I think that it definitely just plays a bit of a key, you know.
You mentioned earlier that that you can kind of evolve and change your list over time, and as you grow, you know, obviously some of your priorities are going to change. What are some of the things that you've added to your list in the last year or two? What are the things that you're kind of getting excited about, getting hopeful about? What are the things that you are starting to move towards that you hadn't thought about before?
Yeah, good question. First, I'll mention the thing that we are moving towards that has been on the list for a long time, but it's just been taking a lot longer than expected. And that is make a movie, you know, make a documentary, which is the reason why we started Buried Life 12 years ago. We thought it was going to be a 2-week, process. And so now we're finally finishing it, which is really cool. And I think that, like, the number 100 on the list is go to space. And I think that would be, you know, a really cool way to kind of end the film. And it sums up a lot of what Buried Life is about. But so that is something that's kind of, we are reinvigorated by, because it's getting closer to the finish line.
That's great. That's really exciting, man.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah. So, and then some new things that I'm adding to the list. So buy a house, you know, I'm looking for a house with my girlfriend. So that's, you know, a whole new step, which is something that, you know, I wasn't really interested in a year ago. Yeah. And then as I'm doing more speaking, you know, thinking about is the next, like, platform, a book, show, podcast, you know, for like spreading this message. So that's something that I'm dabbling with too. And I mean, the speaking stuff was really something that wasn't on the list a year or a year and a half ago, and now very much, you know, is, because of it's just like so much fun, and it's a cool way to spread it. But yeah,
isn't it cool how you can try something once after never even considering it and realizing, oh, I love this thing. Like, I'm so glad that I tried something new, because honestly, if you just thought about the things that you could already imagine, if you only did the things you already could imagine, that's a very short list. And I love that you're like, oh, I'm gonna speak a little bit, and then you're like, oh, this is awesome. Like, let's do more of this thing.
Totally. Like, I think Tim Ferriss says it well. He says, follow what's easy. You know, a lot of times we think that we need to struggle, and like, especially like entrepreneurs out there, like, that you have to grind it, you know, out, and it's all about the struggle. And if it's not struggling, then it's not, you know, worth it. But he says, like, look at something you want to do and ask yourself, what would it look like if it were easy, and follow that. And I think that doing that and combining with, like, following your curiosity and something that, like, just feels like it's just, when I say easy, like, it just sort of flows, like it happens. It's not a huge struggle. You know, things appear, and like more opportunity kind of unravels. And that's when I believe you really are following the right path. You know, it's and there's a lot of different words for it. Some, you know, there's the far left is like The Secret, the movie about, like, you know, putting it out there. But I think it's just about, you know, really stopping enough to listen to, like, being honest with yourself, like, what do you really want, and being intentional about, you know, following that. And what's something that's on your list?
Oh man, good question. I didn't know that I was going to get asked this. I mean, one of mine is no joke. Like I 100% plan on going to space in my lifetime. So that's like one of my big audacious ones where it's not really on like the heart level. It's not like this is part of who I am and what my heart is calling me towards, but it's just something that I've always kind of known, like I'm going to go to space in my lifetime. In fact, I'm looking to my left and I actually, in my office, I've got this jar that says Space Fund, and it's an old Prego jar, and I taped over it with a piece of paper that just says Space Fund, and it's filled with quarters. It's probably tops $75. But at some point, I'm going to cash that in, as well as probably thousands more dollars that will be saved up or something, and buy a ticket to space, and it'll be fun. And so that's one of the big audacious things. It's interesting that you asked, because I even in prepping for this podcast, I don't know if I'm asking myself these things. I've always got short goals, but for me, I've always, if you'd asked me what I would be doing, 2 years from now, if you had asked me that 2 years ago, I would have never guessed that I'd be making a newspaper and hosting a podcast. And, well, I guess we started the podcast 2 years ago, but like all these things, I never would have guessed I'd have a dog. And so sometimes I don't think that far in advance to think about where things could go, which I love and enjoy. But I don't know, this conversation with you is inspiring me to think a little bit more long-term and say, no, what are those things that I dream of? Because I can be intentional about working towards them if I know what they are. I don't have to just, go with the flow. I do want to go, like Tim Ferriss says, with the things that are, kind of easy and natural, but I want to make sure that I'm doing that with intentionality.
And also, I think it's great that you're in it. Like you're actively in those things that you, for lack of a better word, put on your list.
Yeah, totally.
And so, and I think that's the one of the best places to be, is like you're doing the thing that you love. I mean, at the end of the day, that's what it's about, right? Like it's about doing what you love. And if you can't do, if the thing that you do for money isn't what you love, that's okay. That's totally okay. But just try and make sure that you're doing some other things outside of work that you love.
Yeah.
That's
a good reminder.
And a list help is just a reminder that those things are there, because they'll get buried. As you said, it just happens. It's completely normal that these things get shoveled under, the rug. But I think too, I also think it's important just to note that, you mentioned that go to space it's kind of like a personal thing. It's not like a big heart thing. I hear that a lot, in the sense that some people are almost apologetic for their like list items that are totally just self-indulgent, or maybe they're really small, or like all that stuff is like completely, and I believe that's okay. You can't take care of other people if you don't take care of yourself, right? Like, on the airplane, it says like oxygen mask will fall, put it on yourself before you put it on your child. Like, I feel that's the same way with life. Like all these things, a life list, don't feel bad about having a list of things that you want to do, or that are just for yourself, or taking time for yourself, or if there's no, greater purpose than to just make you happy. That is the purpose. That is enough, because if you're happy, it's going to change everything. It's going to change the people around you. It's like I said before, by doing what you love, you inspire other people to do what they love. You're going to give back just by doing what you love, or just by being happy. That's going to make such an impact on all the people around you and yourself. And ultimately, it's what it's about. And like, I think that we talk about, you get more fulfillment from helping others. Again, that's making you happy. So that's like, that's in there. So yeah, I just think it's like sometimes important just to note that, because I don't want people to feel like this is a self-indulgent thing, or they should almost feel bad, because that, I think, is the normal way, or where your head usually tends to go, is almost feeling guilty. But it's not. This, you have to do this. I believe you 100% have to do this.
Man, dude, that's encouraging. Thank you. Thanks for saying that. I wanted to ask, because we talked about it a little bit earlier, how are you doing with depression stuff, now at this point in your life? Because, 12 years ago, you're struggling, and you kind of started doing this thing that changed everything for you. Where are you at these days?
it's interesting that you asked, because about a year and a half ago, I would have said, great. I really haven't hit any lows. But then a year and a half ago, I did. And I started to feel and notice like that I was seeing the same things and feeling the same way that I was back when I hit my low after high school. And as I slowly started to slide down, I sort of thought, okay, I need to make some changes here, or I'm going to just obviously go right back to where I was years ago. And so one of them was finding a therapist. I never really found a therapist that I liked. So I never talked with one. And I found someone that I liked, and not only liked, love. And I think that, there's this big stigma around therapy, not so much on the coast, but even I think to some extent on the coast. But I mean, I think everywhere there's this stigma around this being a therapy being like because you have a weakness, or you're broken. One, everybody does. And what therapy is just, it's a great way to learn the tools that you need to be your best, right? Another way of looking at therapy is just self optimization. You're really just learning things and talking with an expert about life and uncovering blind spots that you might not see. And so what I've learned is like these things that I do unconsciously that are contributing to like a poor state of mind. So I can recognize them, and that awareness is super powerful. And also tools that I can use that when I start to feel this way, that I do, that I implement. And by the way, let's just get this out on the table. Everybody struggles. So this isn't something that is just unique to me, to you, or to, if you're listening thinking like, yeah, I feel like this sometimes too. Everybody does. To be human is to struggle. Some people struggle more than others, and some people deal with things in a deeper way. But just to know that you're not alone, I think is very important when you start to go through this process. And this is all backed by data. Everyone will go through some sort of mental health crisis in their life, right? Whether it's the bereavement, or whether it's dealing with the bereavement, or divorce, or relationship issues. And so like this is a scary stat, but more than half of the suicides are people that are not technically struggling with a mental illness, right? They're not diagnosed with a mental illness. It's just from people just struggling with stress or relationships or stuff like that. So this is something that is touching everybody. And so, to try and lift the stigma off mental health as a whole is very important. And to try and lift the stigma off of therapy is super important, because that's I wish everyone could go to therapy. I mean, I don't know why, if you play basketball, you don't try and play basketball without a basketball coach, right? So why would you try and do that with life? Yeah. The biggest game that you're faced with is just like it's nonsensical. So, if you're able to and have the means to, and, I think therapy is one thing. Another thing, and, you talk about this and lots of people do, is meditation. I actually use meditation a lot as a tool when I can't sleep. So when I have trouble sleeping, I know that that's a bad sign, and that's a really difficult pattern to get out of. When you stop sleeping, you really start to go sometimes on a downward spiral. So it's really important, just as a base, when you start to feel like you're on shaky ground, to make sure you get enough sleep. And so for me, when I can't sleep, I'll meditate, and usually I can get back to sleep. And I try and implement it as a practice every day. So that's another tool. Exercise is another tool that helps, with depression. It helps your endorphins. It generally helps, just stimulate your body. And also helping other people tends to help me. So your brain doesn't have the capacity to think about yourself and someone else at the same time. So you literally are taking yourself out of your own brain, which sometimes is a good thing. And you're thinking about someone else, you're helping them. And not only do you do that, but you also build a connection with somebody, which is really important when you feel depressed. Human connection is very important. So you're building a relationship with someone, and you're deepening a relationship with someone, and you're also taking yourself out of your own head. So that's a great way to kind of like another tool in the toolkit when you're dealing with something like that. But there's many different things. I could go on and on, but I don't want to sort of belabor it. But I just feel like this isn't necessarily a common conversation. And I really believe it should be, because everyone should have these tools that also medication. Sometimes you need medication. That's okay. It's something that if you're in a place where you need to help getting out of a really difficult mind frame, and that happens to be some medication, that's all good. I think it's just important that you're also talking with a therapist as well. So you're working through those things and not just using the medication. So you're actually, working on solving those, or not solving those, but working on those issues or problems or blind spots or whatever that might be causing you to need the medication. Or maybe you just need medication. That's fine too, because like if you're diabetic, you need insulin. That's the way it goes. So a lot of stigma and a lot of sort of general awareness that I think is just not out there.
Yeah.
Which really, hopefully, will be in the coming years.
I'm so glad that you are, so open to talking about this and sharing, what's going on, because you're a public figure. You're somebody that people know, and they especially know you as somebody who lives a fun, adventurous, and most of all, a meaningful life. And I think, there's even power in you just being, a male who's willing to talk about these things, because I think so often we put people who are struggling with mental health in kind of a box, or we say, oh, they're this kind of person. And anytime that you can kind of shatter that and you can break down that stigma to say, hey, this is something that affects all of us, I think that that's so powerful. And it literally saves lives. Like it genuinely saves people's lives. And I'm so grateful that I grew up just, knowing and admiring people who were really open about their struggles, and they would say, hey, it's okay to struggle. We all struggle. And that has allowed me, when I've come to places where I've struggled, to already know in those moments, oh, you know what, this is okay, because this musician who I admire said that, or because this friend or mentor who I appreciated said that. And so, I think it's a helpful thing for you to say, for, of course, people who are struggling with mental health, but also people who haven't yet struggled, because it's laying that groundwork and saying, here's what it is. And I'm trying to do my part as well, both in my personal life. I try to, I tell all my friends, I'm a huge evangelist for therapy. I love my therapist, and he's fantastic, and we've got a good relationship. And I really just, I think he's helped me grow just as a human, but also in my mental health. And I think everybody should be able to find someone like him. And of course, there's, accessibility issues. And I long for a day where, everybody has insurance that covers it. But until then, there's so many ways to just be in conversation about your mental health. And I think it can even just start with your conversations with your friends. And that really moves the needle to feel heard and to feel known and to know that you are not alone.
100%. And I'm actually glad you brought that up, because I failed to mention it. If you don't have the means to talk with a therapist, or if you don't think it's right for you, it's the same goes for talking with people around you that you love, or you care about. So as you said, friends and family. Just talking about it with someone that that you can trust and that you love, either or, But as you said, like somebody, because here's the thing, you're going to do that, and they're going to come back to you and return the favor in their time of need. That's what's going to happen.
True. That's really true.
And you want to be there for them. So think about it as this is how you can be there for them, by showing them that you're open enough, and you can be, that you're comfortable with them as a friend, to show your vulnerabilities, so that they can then come back to you one day with their vulnerabilities. That's a good way to think about it.
And maybe this comes full circle in saying, what a cool opportunity to support people in their time of need. In the same way that, with the buried life, you have the opportunity to say, okay, I'm going to help other people accomplish their dreams. And when you're having this mental health conversation, it's essentially saying, okay, what are the roadblocks towards you, thriving and living the life that you dreamed of? I'm going to work with you to do those things and to remove those roadblocks together.
Yeah, absolutely. Because at the end of the day, the two are one and the same, right? Like there's a list is just a barometer so you can hopefully get aligned with those things that are important to you, that are going to bring you happiness and joy, and that will contribute to your mental fitness and health and well-being, And so that's where you always want to have this sort of compass pointing towards. And I think a lot of people feel down in the dumps because they're not doing that. And so this is just a tool, a device so that you just keep that in mind and not forget about it, because it tends to get put on the back burner.
Wow, this conversation left me feeling hopeful and inspired and excited to reclaim the impossible. Obviously, the idea of creating a bucket list feels overwhelming. That's how I feel. I've never really made a bucket list before. But something that I think could be really cool is for us to take Ben's advice seriously and simply start with writing out our goals on paper. Remember that there is a 40% increased likelihood of us actually taking action toward our goals when we write them down. I'm going to take some time, probably today, to sit down, to dream up those things that I think are impossible and list them out. And I hope you'll join me. And then if you're feeling really brave, share those things with someone that you love and trust. If you don't talk about your list, you have no idea who could potentially help make those things happen. I also recommend checking out Ben Nemtin's re-released #1 New York Times bestselling book called The Buried Life. It is beautiful, it's fun, you'll appreciate it. And also do yourself a favor and follow along on his journey on social media. You can follow him on Twitter and Instagram at Ben Nemtin. In this conversation, we talked a lot about mental health and depression and how that weaved into Ben's journey. And we would love to suggest Crisis Text Line for anybody who's listening to this that can relate to Ben and want to get some help. Maybe you just need to talk, whatever it is. Crisis Text Line is amazing. They're available 24 hours a day throughout the United States by texting 741-741 or Canada by texting 686868. If you're new to Sounds Good, we would love for you to stick around. You'd also love my conversations with Jeremy Cowart and Jessica Hish, both inspiring creative individuals who are using their talents for the betterment of others. You can find both of these episodes and more than 100 other episodes by searching for Sounds Good wherever you listen to podcasts. This podcast is created by me, Branden Harvey, as a part of Good, 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 a community that believes in the power of celebrating good news and becoming good news. Chad Michael Snavely and the team at CM Studio edit and mix the show, and Christy Karenbrock offers production support. You can get lots of hopeful stories on social media by following us everywhere at GoodGoodGoodCO. And remember, not all news is cynicism and flames. When you sign up for our Good newsletter, you'll receive good news stories in your inbox every Tuesday morning, ensuring you find hope in your weekly headlines. Check it out and see what else we do at Good 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 at goodgoodgood.co. And on that note, that is a wrap for this week's episode. Go out and refuse to wait for inspiration to live the life you always hoped could be possible. Sound good?